Well, good evening, everyone. From just hearing from the governor, what I would say is the state of Minnesota is somewhat disappointing. As you well remember, we had $18 billion of surplus that was not returned to the taxpayers of Minnesota. We've got mandates on our schools and on our businesses, making things harder to afford. When you hear the words free, as in lunch or college or other free things, just remember that is paid by the taxpayers of Minnesota. We even had a record fraud amount that now is being acknowledged by Democrats here in the state of Minnesota, and yet there were federal investigations that happened just this morning in state. But almost to the very end of the governor's comments and his statements from his speech tonight is when fraud broke through slightly. So when we look at having just 20 days left in this legislative session, we can't fix everything from the last 7 years, but there is still work that we need to do. We've proved in the House that Democrats and Republicans can come together and do work and try to make things a little bit more affordable for Minnesota. But as you're reporting, it's important for Minnesotans to know that, yes, your property taxes are incredibly high right now. Prices at every business in Minnesota are high because of mandates that have been put on specifically during the years 2023 and 2024, full Democrat control in the state of Minnesota. So instead of unifying us and bringing us together in a way that would look for the last 20 days of this legislative session, we heard grandstanding on Democrat priorities, most of which was talked about tonight, was passed with no Republican input whatsoever. I'm hopeful, though, that Minnesota can turn around. We have that opportunity. We do have 20 days left to actually make things a little bit more affordable and try to give some relief. But when you think of our high graduation rates that you heard about tonight, we know only half of our kids can read at grade level. Even though it was talked about, Governor Walz talked about the historic funding in schools, we have had more referendums tried to be passed by our districts because they don't have enough funding right now. So regardless of what you heard, you have to look at where we truly are and ask yourself, are we better, in a better financial place? Are we gathering more Minnesotans to stay here? Or are we watching Minnesotans flood over our borders into other states because of our tax policies and the less affordability here? I think that's a good question for all Minnesotans to ask right now. With that, I will turn it over to Majority Leader Niska for additional comments.
Thank you, Speaker Demuth. You know, it was a disappointing speech in a lot of ways, but really kind of a fitting end to what has been the most divisive governor in Minnesota's history. It would have been nice to have seen some effort at unity beyond just using one Minnesota platitudes. But it was a very divisive speech that was completely about a one-sided view of Minnesota and a one-sided view of Minnesotans. And it would have been good to see some accountability from really a disastrous administration. We had to wait 38 minutes into the speech before we heard anything about the biggest national story about Minnesota, the shocking multi-billion-dollar fraud that struck our state. And then while the governor made hints at taking accountability, he immediately turned to pointing fingers at other states. He said something absurd like fraud is worse in red states, even though we have learned over and over again, both from the U.S. Attorney's Office, and then even just today in testimony from a former Walz employee in the House Fraud Committee that Minnesota had such a reputation for being an easy mark for fraud that it was known in refugee camps in Africa that Minnesota was the place to come to. So it would have been good to hear some accountability on the record of fraud, as Speaker Damas said, on the record of poor educational outcomes, on the record of education mandates and problems that are going to the property taxes of our state. But we didn't hear that. We didn't really hear unifying vision going forward for the last few months of Governor Walz's administration either, and that's disappointing. But we will continue to work on what Minnesotans are expecting from us. They want accountability for the fraud, and they want affordability. They want Minnesota to not be so expensive, and Republicans are going to continue working on that for the last few weeks of the legislative session. And they want us to come together and work on school safety items that we can work on together. Unfortunately, the governor continues to be stuck on things that don't have bipartisan support and is holding hostage, along with the Democrats, things that would have bipartisan support. So all in all, disappointing, but really kind of a fitting cap to what's been a really disappointing gubernatorial administration from Governor Walz. So I'll turn it over to Senate Minority Leader Mark Johnson.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And thank you for being here tonight. This has been an interesting night tonight. It brings me back to 2018 when Governor Walz got into office. There was so much opportunity in this state to change the trajectory, to work together for all of Minnesota. For Minnesotans who are out paying taxes, to business owners, to the folks who are trying to get car tab fees renewed. I mean, ways of making life more affordable. And for a number of years when Republicans controlled the Senate and we were working with across the aisle on that, we had a good budget, we had a surplus, we built that. But you saw as soon as they got the trifecta, when the governor got the trifecta, that's what he highlighted tonight. He wanted to focus on the times when it was a one-sided Minnesota. You talk about the split, talk about the taxes that were increased during that time, $10 billion. Talk about the expenses and the mandates that were pushed down to individuals throughout those years. We are going to be living with this legacy for a long time. And folks, it is not a legacy of affordability. It is not a legacy of accountability. It is not a legacy that makes Minnesotans proud. There is a lot of work to be done in the next few years to undo a number of the things that the governor was highlighting tonight as such trophies in their trophy case. But you go around, you talk to Minnesotans every single day, and you ask them, do you feel better now after these policies have been enacted? And I think the only ones that you're going to hear a yes from are those who are in the Governor Walz's camp, those friends of his, not the folks who are out there every day working hard to make this state better, to make this state where our kids are learning in school, where this is a top state in the nation, like we once were. It's so disappointing to see where we are after a few years of this. I hope that soon when we have a new government, we can turn it around. But there was an opportunity here when Governor Walz was elected, and this is a missed opportunity, and this will be a legacy of disappointment. With that, I think we'll turn it over to questions.
Was it surprising that HCMC bailout wasn't mentioned? And does that have a chance to be one of the handful of things that might get done?
You guys want to speak to that one?
I wasn't surprised that it wasn't mentioned. I know those conversations are continuing with the leaders and with the governor, but I wasn't surprised that that didn't rise to the top.
Has it got a shot, or?
I think we're looking for solutions. There's no guarantee on what that would look like, though. Any other questions?
Speaker, when Governor Walz took office, it was just over a year later that COVID hit, then there was George Floyd, and there were the riots. Would anybody who was governor over the last 6 or 7 years have faced a lot of the same divisions and problems that Governor Walz faced?
You know, when the governor did bring up, when he first was elected and then all of the things that have gone on during his time, there have been some definite challenges during that time. But I think the important thing is a true leader will try to unify people, and a true leader is going to find a way through. A lot of those things, the response to COVID, the response to the death of George Floyd, the response to the federal immigration laws, the way that his administration responded, I would have to say, was it over the top and did it divide people further, or did it bring Minnesotans together? I think divided, and that's the response, not just the circumstance, but a true leader has to lead with a response that unifies and makes things better.
And I imagine you had some questions about, he talked about all the taxes he's cut. Did he leave out all the taxes that were raised?
He did leave that out. He didn't talk about any of the taxes that he raised to do the things that he has already put into place. And even in his proposal right now, he talks about wanting to do a tax cut for Minnesotans right now. But that's on the back of taxing services, banking fees, and others that have never been taxed. And so it's a bait and switch. You really have to look at what that proposal is. There is no way that I heard tonight that the governor's trying to make things more affordable for Minnesotans.
Madam Speaker, what did you make of his challenge to Republicans to vote for anti-fraud bills and not just merely talk about them?
Well, he didn't call out Republicans specifically on the anti-fraud bills, but I think what he was probably referring to specifically is the OIG bill that the Senate passed almost bipartisan last year. And he had said in the State of the State last year, pass the OIG bill, put it on my desk and I'll sign it. House Republicans have been trying to do that since the end of last year, and House Democrats have blocked it at every single way forward, either through amendments or questions or changing things. We voted at least 4 times on the OIG bill this year, and House Democrats have blocked it every time.
What about his comments about gun control? Is that what you really mean, is that you don't want to do more? What was your reaction to that?
I think the governor's comments on school safety overall need to be looked at. There is not just one way where the votes don't exist to ban certain types of guns, but there are ways that we could look at school safety, mental health supports, making sure that we're looking even as far as social media and how that is being used. These are proposals that House Republicans specifically had last year in September following the Annunciation tragedy, when the governor was going to call us back for a special session. We had proposals that would have added those mental health supports and those school safety dollars for public, private, and charter, so would protect all kids rather than just certain kids in Minnesota. Those are the things that we're looking at. I was surprised that he left those other items out.
Not one Republican stood or applauded when he talked about any of the gun bills. Is that indicative of the fact that they are just not going to happen this session?
You know, the gun bills, when Democrats had full control of state government, didn't have the votes within their own caucuses, Senate and House. So I would say that's very indicative.
The governor mentioned again his child care credit, which is in the supplemental budget. Is that something that has any traction with you and Republicans?
We'll keep looking at it. We are headed toward a deficit in a few short years, and so any type of tax credit has to have a pay for, and we'll be looking at that.
Seemed like the beginning of the speech was really focused on some of the events of the last year and reflecting on those. I'm wondering if you guys have any thoughts on maybe sort of the reflection that was done on Speaker Portman not being here, some of those things.
Yeah, I think it was absolutely appropriate that the governor acknowledged the tragedies and what we've gone through as a state, both politically and with Annunciation family. I think that was absolutely appropriate to give acknowledgement to that.
Say, Senator Johnson, what did you make of his comments about One Minnesota, kind of defending it?
Well, I remember up in Crookston at a coffee shop when the governor was first elected, and he came up and I said, well, what does One Minnesota mean? Does that mean that St. Paul is going to be dictating to Minnesota what a one-size-fits-all policy? And he said, no, it's going to be a grassroots effort to change policy and to change St. Paul. And my fear was actualized over the last 8 years. It's absolutely been a one-size-fits-all from St. Paul coming down. That's what One Minnesota meant to the governor. That's really a missed opportunity for this state. That's where you're seeing 2 different flags that are flying in cities not that far from each other. It just signifies the division that we're seeing in this state right now. This is not one Minnesota, the way that things have been put together right now. It's so disappointing to me. But, you know, we're going to have 20 days. We're going to work together. Republicans are going to be showing up every day, trying to figure out ways forward, no matter what the governor does to divide us.
The governor said that the world has seen our strengths, referring to the people of Minnesota during Operation Metro Surge. Would you agree with that Minnesotans showed strength when federal immigration officials were here in January and February?
Well, if you go back even to the George Floyd protests, you go back to the response to COVID, you go back to the response that the governor initiated during the Metro Surge, it was one of confrontation. It was one of failed leadership. It was one where he failed to act in any of those situations, which really drove up the tensions in this state. So you had to have Minnesota citizens stepping up in different ways across the state here to help each other because they weren't seeing the leadership from the top. This is a place where the governor could have really stepped in and done something, as the speaker has said, to unify us, to make us proud as one state as we move forward. And I think if you move around the state talking to people, you don't see that same level of pride depending on which community and where you are in the state, because quite frankly, only half of the state seems like they were represented over the last 8 years.
Thank you.
Okay, one other thing I just want to mention. You heard the governor talk about wanting to make sure that people of color could vote. I'm a black woman, married, so I did change my name. I have never had a problem getting any type of ID, and I have never had a problem voting at all. And I think that comment specifically was really disrespectful to a number of people, specifically people of color in the state of Minnesota.